All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming out here on this rainy night. We really appreciate it. My name is Julia. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm on the events team here at Books Are Magic. Before we get started, just a few quick logistics. First off, we do ask that if you're in the audience, you keep your mask on at all times while at this event. Secondly, we are going to be doing a hand-raised Q&A towards the end of the night, so start thinking of your questions now and then hang on to them. And then after the talk tonight, just want to let folks know that Meryl is going to be signing and personalizing books at that desk all the way at the back of the store, and we also have additional books up at the front to purchase. And if you're with us on YouTube, shout out to the folks who are already waiting when I hit start. We'd love to encourage you to buy the book as well. There's a link in the live stream description to do so. Okay. With all the logistics out of the way, so very excited tonight to introduce Meryl Wilsner and Casey McQuiston. So I'm sure many of you have already heard the honestly very irresistible pitch for Mistakes Were Made. It's the MILF book, where a college student sleeps with someone amazing, only to learn the next day that that someone is her best friend's mom. And for those of you who are familiar with Meryl's first book, Something to Talk About, you'll remember just how skilled Meryl is at creating really incredible slow burn sexual tension. I'm pleased to report, after reading Mistakes Were Made, that they are equally as talented at writing full speed ahead, open doors. And more than that, Meryl just truly writes fully realized characters, manages to balance these really beautiful, sweet, tender moments with the sexy times. So this is absolutely the MILF book, but it's also an incredibly fun story about love that challenges expectations, defies odds, and it's a story I'm so excited to celebrate with you all tonight. Meryl Wilsner writes happily ever afters for queer folks who love women. They are the author of Something to Talk About and Mistakes Were Made. Born in Michigan, Meryl lived in Portland, Oregon, and Jackson, Mississippi before returning to the Mitten State. Some of Meryl's favorite things include all four seasons, button-down shirts, as exhibited here, the way giraffes run, and their wife. And as I mentioned, Meryl is joined tonight by Casey McQuiston. Casey is the author of the New York Times bestselling romantic comedies, Red, White, and Royal Blue, and One Last Stop. As a Louisianian, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, living in New York City, Casey enjoys telling long, loud stories and deep frying things in a kitchen that's too small for all that. And also in that kitchen is Pepper, an always hungry poodle. Casey's also the author of I Kiss Shara Wheeler, a young adult novel. So that's enough for me. Everyone, please give a very warm welcome to Meryl and Casey.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here with you tonight.
I am so excited to be here. Also, do you get used to like people saying nice things and you have to figure out what to do with your face while they are? I was not prepared.
My go-to has become like,
Yeah.
just like not the most professional thing I could do.
I am a finger guns bisexual.
Oh
so.
yeah, I have been, but I've really like gotten onto that like hang loose life.
I like that. I love that for you.
It started
really.
as a bit, and now I can't.
As
stop
most
doing
things
it.
do.
Yeah. Anyway, hi. I am so excited to talk about this book with you.
Me too.
So I'm just gonna jump right in if that's okay. First off, the first thing I wrote in all caps with an exclamation point is MILFs! Let's talk about MILFs. Obviously, this is a book that celebrates the sexiness and the sexual power of older women or older. She's like what, 38?
Yes, I know their ages. I think she turns 30.
Erin is like 40-ish, yes. Which like I am uncomfortable calling that an older woman as someone who is in their 30s. But she's definitely older than Cassie, who's 21, 22. So would you want to talk a bit about how you chose to explore the dynamic of an older woman and a younger woman?
I just love older women.
Very fair.
Yeah, I think part of it is also that I really love a romance where the two people like absolutely should not be doing this,
Yeah.
and then do it anyway. And I think that age difference lends itself to that like immediately.
Yeah.
So that is one of the reasons that I tend that way. I do remember there was a comment on, like, I don't know, a TikTok or something when Mistakes Were Made was announced that was like, oh, first something to talk about, then Mistakes Were Made. Like, this author's into MILFs, I love it. I mean, I am, but you didn't have to say it like right like that, stranger. But yeah, no, just I love that. Obviously, with Best Friend's Mom, it becomes even more like, you're not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
But I just love that, like, we really shouldn't be doing this, and here we're gonna do it a lot.
It feels like such a delicious conflict engine in this book of like, there's these layers of like, oh, this can't be happening, and yet it makes it even hotter when they just can't stop doing it.
That literally exactly. that exactly. Yes.
It's the chemistry is so strong, you will go against all of your better judgment.
That's what I love.
Yes, amazing. So we're gonna, like I said, we're jumping right in. So this book opens with, the first chapter is a full-on, like, I don't know if I would, it's like rated R, like it is.
I mean, there's fingering, I think, on page 7.
Yeah, it's full on, like, no holds barred, no fades to black, like, we're gonna call body parts the body parts. There's not gonna be any, like, euphemisms for, like, mounds or anything like that in there. And I love it. I'm thrilled by this, to open a book and that's published by a mainstream publisher and it's like this. So can you talk about the decisions that went into doing that?
Well, first of all, this was only supposed to be the first chapter ever. This began as fan fiction. It was going to be a one-shot of fan fiction. It was going to be smut, and it was so fun, and then I was just going to end it, and that was it. And then I had friends who were like, what if she goes home over winter break with her? And I'm like, well, now here I am.
What if they were stuck in a house during a sentimental time of year?
I think there was also a request, I think a specific request for shower sex as well, so just checking them off the list.
You're so selfless.
So like that's always where it started, was just like, it was just always horny, basically. And coming from something to talk about, which is, I really do think it's 97% on the Kindle when they sleep together, spoiler alert. To this was very fun. And also just like, there were people who read something to talk about who were like, oh, if you've not read FF before, like this is a good one to start with. And I was like, I'm gonna kill you.
It's so good because I don't have to watch them have sex, and that makes me comfortable.
Yeah, I love that. So like, something to talk about was, it was never gonna be Mistakes Were Made. It was never gonna, start with a sex scene. It doesn't work for those characters or that story at all. And so it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm intentionally gonna write a book with so many sex scenes because of those people who said things like that, because I had actually written the first draft prior to something to talk about.
Sure.
But yeah, it was nonetheless, it was very fun to do that, and to have it published by a mainstream publisher is pretty cool, especially because I know author friends who have literally like had their editors say like, oh, could we just use a word other than cunt, because I don't really like that personally.
Well,
and I'm like,
personally
no,
do.
I'm gonna put it in there.
I feel like so inspired. I also love, so Erin, our MILF, she's very sexual. She's pretty horny, and she's allowed to be, and she's never like, oh no, this is not proper for a woman of my age to be like so sexually active. No, she's sexually excitable. Yes. Was that like a conscious decision to like be like, oh, older women fuck too, or is it just about, I like to write this character?
Yeah, as you're asking these questions, I'm like, all right, maybe I should have been smarter and more intentional about this.
I mean, it's okay if it's also just because it's hot.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, it just was. I think it's kind of funny because, like, Erin is like a sexual being, and then like her best friend is like hornier and literally like gives her blow by blows, literally of her dates and things like that. So, I guess it wasn't like oh, I'm going to let older women be sexual, but I'm like, they are. So
you weren't trying to like do women's lib. You were just like
I was just horny.
Okay, I love that, and I think that we were just talking backstage about how liberating it is to write something that's not trying to be important. It's just horny.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't have to. I mean, I loved something to talk about, but it was sort of more important and talking about serious, homophobia and racism in Hollywood and things.
Yeah.
And it was much more fun to just be like, it's your best friend's mom. Let's go.
I also love the tagline. I just love that it's literally on the cover of the book. It's her best friend's mom. Was the tagline you, or was it like a team effort?
I think it was
marketing.
I'm pretty sure it was a team effort.
Yeah.
I was like, look at my team.
Vicky, would you like to take
I think it was a group effort.
I do think it was a group effort.
Yeah.
I remember that I just wanted to make sure that it was about it was that she liked someone. It
Yeah.
wasn't about having feelings, because Cassie is too stupid to know that.
Yeah.
And I needed to make sure that was clear.
Well, she's too stupid, but she is like inside such a hard little shell.
Yeah.
She is just a little macadamia nut. and it's so delightful to watch her slowly be cracked by a MILF.
In more ways than one.
Hey. So I promise we're gonna move on from the topic of sex soon. But okay. so sex scenes and romance. Let's talk a bit about the role that they play for you in storytelling. Because sometimes they are there just to bring an element of pleasure for the author and the reader, which is very valid. And sometimes they are there to, progress the dynamic between two characters. And I feel like there's a mix of that in this book. And how do you approach sex scenes like on a craft level when you're folding them into the story?
I think I do probably lean toward what can I do to make these, to advance something here. But sometimes that something is just how hot they are for each other. That counts as something.
That's what romance is.
Yeah. So I do think that I lean more that way than just oh, this is fun. In my next book, I have a couple of off-page sex scenes, but that's mostly just because it's too long right now. I'm sorry. But yeah, no, I do try to lean more into, what does this advance? How does this change their dynamic? Or how does, not necessarily change their dynamic, but also show their dynamic.
Yeah.
Just that may already exist, but not, maybe they're not aware of it, maybe the readers haven't seen it yet, just show a different part of them is more the way that I lean. But yeah, I mean, also, it's fun.
Yes, I think it's good to have a balance of both, because in real life and real love stories, you're not always hooking up to advance the plot.
Yeah.
Exactly. Building physical intimacy is also a real part of love.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, and that building of physical intimacy does count as, and at least in a romance, as advancing things.
Yes.
So even if that's the whole thing, rather than oh, this is going to show that this person's, self-conscious about this one thing or whatever.
Yeah. Do you feel that more books should have sex scenes?
I feel, yes. I mean, but at the same time, I do recognize, especially as someone who wrote something to talk about in this, that different books need different things. I think you should have what's right for your book, but I think you should lean toward more.
I think that every space opera should have a sex scene in it.
That's fair.
So this is a thing I always like to ask romance authors, because I think a lot of people have different approaches with it, which is when you have two characters you're kind of choosing to be your main pairing, you're developing them. Do you start by building these characters individually based on what you find interesting and then figuring out how they work together? Or is it more of this is the dynamic I want and this is what kind of backstory I need to inform this dynamic and make it possible?
Definitely the latter.
Yeah.
I have a whole, literally a full spreadsheet of ideas that I might or might not write someday.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are as simple as someone who fosters dogs and the vet. That's the whole idea. That's the whole idea right there. That's it. I have nothing else to it.
And they're just bringing a parade of sickly little dogs in.
Or they find reasons to be oh, my dog's limping, or oh my, but that's the whole idea. That's all I have for it. And then I have other ones that I have whenever I name characters, I'm too far into it. So there's some of them that I have named characters that I have. This is what this happens, and then this happens, and this happens. And there's always some that are, start at the bottom of the spreadsheet with something as simple as, this dynamic. And then slowly I'm oh wait. And slowly move it up, because the ones at the top are the ones that sort of have more information. But yeah, I feel like it's always dynamic. Though I guess, there are times when I'm thinking of one idea that Vicky should buy later. Where I had one specific, like I had the dynamic of one person that I was like, this is a character that I want to explore, and what dynamic would affect that? Like how could I bring a different character in? But yeah, a lot of times it literally is. Or like, I went skiing for the first time in probably 20 years, maybe, to be honest. Maybe 15, 20 years, this past winter, and just being at, like, it's not a resort, it's a tiny hill, it's in Michigan, and it's not mountains. I was like, oh my God, I could write an entire series of a lift operator, and that's just like what my brain is doing, like, constantly.
I love that.
And so, like, and anywhere I go, I'm like, oh my God, what about, like, I could do this, and then I have to add it to the spreadsheet.
My brain is similarly, like, stuck in rom-com mode,
the way
absolutely. That yours is. But for me, it's like, I need to be on the level of having a spreadsheet, and I'm so fascinated by, you're just constantly collecting these little morsels of rom-com potential.
I will say that it used to just be like a note sap in my phone, and then my agent, Patrice, who couldn't be here tonight, like sent out a, hey, like, here, give me every idea that you might ever write, and let me know, like, what level of planning you are at it. And I started the email with, like, strap in, like, here we go. And I think at the time, I sent her like 17 at the time, and I've added, so she got that turned into a spreadsheet, and then I've just kept track of the spreadsheet and added to it ever since.
Wow.
They will not all be written, to be clear. Some of them will stay at the bottom of the thing.
But it's always good to have, because, like, what if you need, like, an idea for a short story collection or something like that? Yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, what we were just talking about character design and development, can you kind of walk us through developing and designing Cassie and Aaron, who are, if you haven't read yet, they're our main two characters?
As I said, it did start as fan fiction, so I had cardboard cutouts right there. So it was almost, it was about developing them, but it was also about developing them as my own characters, like in a way differently than what I might, going in within the fan fiction. But I think the way I develop all characters is I think I know who they are, and then I write for a while, and then I'm like, oh, and also they have this issue, and they feel bad about this thing, and just throw faults at them as I'm writing. But I almost have to write my way to it. Like, I always feel like I know my characters, and then as I'm writing, I realize, like, oh, I'm gonna give them this thing. Yeah. And sometimes that thing is really deep and great, and sometimes it's like, they really like yogurt. Like, it's just random stuff, but I sort of have to write my way there, I feel like.
Yeah, so was there, like, were there can you name some little details that you came up with for Aaron and Cassie in those moments? Do either of them like yogurt?
I don't feel like that was this book, no. When I first wrote this, the first draft of it was one point of view from Cassie's point of view. Yeah. So a main thing that I had to figure out as I was working them was, like, why is Erin doing this? Erin is the MILF, she's the one sleeping with her daughter's friend. And when I'm just writing Cassie's point of view, I'm like, would Erin do this? And then I'm like, doesn't matter.
What's going on in Erin's head is none of my business.
I don't know it, I don't care. And so I did have to, like, figure that out. So that I think in revisions, Erin became a lot, like, Cassie, I feel like was always sort of fairly well developed.
She's a very, very strong character.
Yeah, she's just like, that's just sort of how she was.
Yeah.
And Erin I had to get to know in that way and realize, like, what those issues were, and just, like, her, honestly, her, like, entire relationship with her mom, who is dead in the book, but it's a thing for her, is something that I was not in a first draft at all, because I never had to think about it.
Yeah.
So it's just stuff like that of realizing, like, mostly with Erin, who she is as a person.
Yeah. I love that. So they are both, Cassie and Erin are both, like, these ambitious, scientifically minded women who are really, like, intense about going after what they want and their goals. And was that something that you kind of knew from jump about them, or something that you developed as you went on?
That I feel like I knew from jump. That they both are very confident in themselves in a lot of ways. And then less confident in a couple of other ones, but sort of they don't question themselves, especially in sort of the career or like intelligence side of things. Like they're both very smart, they know what they're doing, and they never doubt that, and they never really did in my mind. It was like these are these two badass women basically. But one thing that I really like about writing FF is that you get to write so many different types of women. And in Mistakes Were Made particularly, there are, my 3 other sort of side characters who are relatively integral to the book. Who it's just so fun to be able to be like, and this is what this person's like, and this is what this, and get to show different types of strength within women. And just, all different types of, I just love women.
I mean, it's the like Little Women gif of Saoirse Ronan.
Yes.
Women.
Exactly.
I love how, both Cassie and Aaron struggle with connecting with like their immediate nuclear family. And they kind of respond in different ways, where I think Aaron does a better job of like pursuing connections, and Cassie is, like I said, our little macadamia nut, and puts up these walls and doesn't want to let them down. And can you talk a bit about just like exploring those different kinds of coping and these 2 different women?
I think probably part of that does come from the age difference of, Aaron has been through enough and knows enough to sort of recognize that her relationship or struggles with her own family, and especially with her own mother, doesn't mean everyone's like that.
Sure.
And doesn't mean that she shouldn't form those connections. And she's been able to have connections over a long period of time. So she has people who have been by her side and haven't let her down already for, this length of time. Because she knows a couple of her best friends for, the majority of her life. Whereas Cassie is still in that, I learned how to take care of myself, and I'm going to keep doing that, and I don't need anyone else's help, and I don't need to think about it, I don't need to let anybody in, I don't need any of that. And I mean, this book is part of Cassie's figuring it out, but I also think like by the time Cassie is older, that she would have gotten there eventually herself anyway. Just because I think that it can be a lot of sort of what you do, and your initial reaction, I guess, to that hurt in general is often like, okay, I have to pull back. As opposed to recognizing like, just because this hurts doesn't mean it's not. Because this hurts doesn't mean I'm not growing. All of that, and figuring that out takes time.
I love to think like by the end of this book, I was just imagining how much Cassie will grow in the next few years of like healthy relationships surrounding her and like being open and vulnerable to them. Do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. I always, I feel like, think about my characters in the far future. Like this book, I think, does technically count as a happily ever after instead of a happily for now. But like with Something to Talk About, it was officially happily for now because it wasn't far in the future in the epilogue. And I'm like, no, they're together forever. No one think that it's not a happily ever after. So I love the idea of sort of where do they go after the end of the book. And I feel like also as I really did cut my teeth in fan fiction. Like that's where I was writing, that's where I learned how to write. I grew up with like sort of being told like romance was trashy. And so I was like, oh, can't do that.
I don't want to be trashy.
So I'll just read and write romantic fan fiction forever.
Which is not trashy.
No, not at all. Well, only because my mom doesn't know about it, so she doesn't know. So yeah, I was always in romance. But I think that like being a fan fiction writer, it's very easy for me to take what a story is and imagine it differently, or imagine this is what comes next, or this is what came before, or whatever. And I do it with my own stories in the same way that I do with everything.
So to revisit the idea of taboo romance, I'm always like fascinated by when you have a taboo dynamic like this one, which is age gap and also my best friend's mom. It seems like it must be a difficult needle to thread of like wanting to push it far enough for that taboo to be sexy and like crackling and great, and then also not wanting to push it too far to like scare the reader off.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you talk a bit about if you had like sort of like guardrails in place, or what was the process of trying to thread that needle?
I honestly don't know that I did. I think it was like, well, surely there are readers as unhinged as me. Here we go. But like in general, whenever I say like I like taboo romance, I'm always like I like taboo romance, but like not like she's 16. Like to be clear, because
everyone's a consenting adult.
But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about Mistakes Were Made is like you're either in it or you're not from the very beginning.
Yeah.
You know there's going to be sex on page. You know it's her friend's mom. Like you don't go for a while and then realize like, oh, this isn't really my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're either from the pitch, you're either like, yes, I want to read that, or like, no, that's not for me, thank you. And yeah, so I don't feel like I had the guardrails of like, oh, let's not make this like too weird. Something that I do like about it is like it was important to me that they met as equals. You know, this wasn't someone who she met as her or that I was thinking even the other way, that Erin met as like Parker's friend.
Sure, yeah.
She met an adult, a consenting adult.
Yeah.
And I think
Hot girl in a bar.
Yeah, she met a hot girl in a bar. And I think that really would change the dynamic if they had met as like, oh, this is my daughter's friend and now I'm attracted to them.
Yeah.
That's definitely not bad, but different.
And I think as much as Cassie can be a bit like a little immature at times, but at the same time I do think Cassie is like kind of an old 21 because she's been through it.
Yeah.
You know, which I think helps too.
And yeah, exactly. And like in the way that Erin, you know, has been through hurt and knows that you can still connect with people.
Yeah.
Cassie has, you know, figured out you can go for what you want in a way that Erin hasn't.
Sure.
So like they definitely both have parts that help each other and that sort of complement each other. And are able to learn from each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's important in any relationship, but especially like when there is sort of a power dynamic like that. You don't want like, oh, I'm the smart older person and you're like a small child. Like no, thank you.
Well, I loved how much Cassie was the one calling Erin out on her bullshit, which I think was like a great dynamic for them.
Yeah, because Cassie's like, I was not trying to do this. Like, I was specifically trying not to do this. Thank you. I was trying to be good, and you're screwing it up for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so how are we on time?
Like 5 more minutes?
Okay, so I have a couple more, and then we'll kick to Q&A. Okay.
Oh, time flies when you're having fun.
I know. Okay, so speaking of, my next question is just that I could tell how much fun you were having when you were writing this book. Like, obviously with every book it's hard too, but like when an author is having a great time, I think it's very apparent on the page, and the reader kind of gets infected with that. You know, so can you tell me like what were some of your favorite parts, or like really fun moments where you're just like giggling to yourself typing? I know I have those.
Well, you know, I wrote this before I knew anything about publishing, which helps when you're want to have fun while writing.
Yeah, there's like not like the anxiety bug on your shoulder.
Yeah, there's you know no contract, this has to get done at this time, and as I said, like I had friends in my ear being like, ooh, what is this? So some of it is like, I'm gonna write this and it's gonna kill this specific friend of mine. Like,
those are the best parts.
I feel like, honestly, and you and I talked about this scene beforehand. I feel like the strap-on scene specifically was specifically written like to kill one of my friends. The book's dedicated to them, so they deserve it. But yeah, no, things like those are really fun to write. And I do always have to give a shout out to my wife, who, for one scene, I have a problem when I'm writing where I like decide how a scene's supposed to go, and then it's not working, and I can't make it work. And I went to my wife and I was like, I can't figure out how to make like this moment like a serious sort of intense thing, and she was like, aren't you writing a rom-com? I was like, why don't you just make it funny? That's a better idea. And we're just like, I decide like this is how a scene's gonna be, and then even when I can't make it work, I don't recognize like I made this. Like I can change literally anything about it. And yeah, once she told me to make the scene funny, it was a lot more fun to write.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just love those times when like you're writing and you're like, I'm so funny. I don't care if anyone else thinks that's funny. I love that.
Well, mine is like I will definitely have moments where I'm writing and I'm like, I'm gonna send a screenshot of this to like one particular friend. And they are going to lose their minds. Yeah. So what would you like to see more of in romance as a genre?
So much. Not white people.
Wow.
Not straight people, not cis people. I feel like as a whole, the genre is moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And especially, I feel that a lot as, like, when Something to Talk About came out, it was the first in-print queer female romance from Berkeley. And I was, like, desperate for somebody to talk to about, like, what is this like to publish, like, queer romance, you know, in a traditional adult space.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have that sort of community because it honestly like didn't exist. Not to say that people weren't writing queer romance, obviously, but sort of traditional publishing was, especially adult traditional publishing was lagging behind. I feel like YA sort of moves the needle first and then adult kind of follows. But yeah, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Like now, there's so many people who are writing queer romance and being published by the Big Five or Big Four, big conglomerate of however many there are. And so that has been really wonderful to see this time. Like, I mean, honestly, even just going on tour and being like, here's who you could talk to, like this person, this, and I'm like, yeah, there are so many people who I could talk to about this who are doing the same thing, and that is really wonderful.
Yeah.
So I always want to see more women, more queer women. But also, like, specifically, a book that came out earlier this year, Love and Other Disasters. If you haven't read it, read it. It's my favorite romance of all time. It has a non-binary main character who uses they, them pronouns.
Yeah.
I'm a non-binary author who uses they, them pronouns. Never considered writing a non-binary main character because I was like, it didn't even enter my mind as like a possibility of something that mainstream publishing would do and that would do well also.
Yeah.
And so like seeing that, and I mentored Anita on it, Anita Kelly, who's the author. I was one of their mentors in Pitch Wars, which is sort of what it came out of. And so like working with them on it and seeing, and I spent the whole time being like, okay, Anita, like publishing you might not get that many like agent requests and you might not sell it that easily. Like really trying to like let them down easy because I loved the book, but I just sort of was like, traditional publishing, come on. And then like, you know, it sort of blew up. Obviously got published. I think they got a 3-book deal. Like just that was so wonderful to see, and I'm so excited to move in that direction and to write, you know, non-binary main characters myself.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, first of all, I just want to say I would like to see more strap-on scenes.
Awesome.
Because I think you wrote the first one I've ever read in romance, and I'm sure, not to say that they're not out there, but it was a very groundbreaking moment for me. Okay, my last question is, do you want to just like name some of your favorite MILFs?
Of course I do.
Of
course I do.
I would love to hear your thoughts.
Hannah Waddingham from Ted Lasso.
Ooh,
I like one of the book ideas, like in the spreadsheet that was way down here. I realized I could make her like face claim her sort of as the main character, and like suddenly the characters are named now.
Suddenly that character's really important.
Yeah, very important. In my acknowledgements, actually, I mentioned Ashley Herring Blake, who wrote Delilah Green Doesn't Care.
Love those.
Who I like almost dedicated the book to because she just gets very embarrassed when you call her a MILF, and I'm like, yes, absolutely, thank you. So definitely one of my favorites.
A personal favorite.
I want to know who are your favorite MILFs?
I was just thinking about this. I feel like she's kind of a gilf at this point, but Jamie Lee Curtis is a classic.
Wait, oh my god, I'm so sorry, Lucy Liu, I didn't mention you. I'm so sorry.
I was literally thinking about this, like, because I knew I was going to ask you this, and I had a feeling you were going to turn around on me.
I don't want to turn around on
I feel like afterward, when you come up to get your book signed, if you will, in addition to your sticky note, come prepared with your favorite MILF.
You are selfless right now.
I think Lucy Lou's a great one. I am also a big fan of like a classic Sandy Bullock.
Oh, fair.
You know, and I just watched Miss Congeniality, which has not aged well.
It really has.
But you know who has aged well is Sandra Bullock. So Kate Beckinsale.
Oh yeah.
Kate Beckinsale was one of those like, oh my god, I just really like her as an actress. I just want to watch all of her movies because she's such a good actress. I love Pearl Harbor because of the hot men in it and her acting.
I went like one of my very formative gay memories is going to see the movie Click. Starring Adam Sandler in the theater, and Kate Beckinsale plays his wife and the mother of his children, and she's walking around in these little pajama shorts, and I have like such a vivid memory of her like, walking down the stairs in her pajama shorts, and I'm like 13, and it would be a full like 8 years later that I was like, well, everyone, I have something to tell you. Surprise. Anyway, all right, so let's open up to Q&A. Yeah, go for it.
So you mentioned you're into fanfic, but do you have like a first romance novel that you think of as like the romance novel that got you into the genre?
Yeah, and we're gonna repeat for the friends at home watching. So we're talking about whether Meryl has a particular romance that was their first romance that they loved.
Honestly, like as I said, I very much was sort of taught romance was not the way to go. I'm not somebody who like found my mom's romance novels, and so it's much newer. Which makes me feel kind of bad. But The Kiss Quotient by Helen. Oh my goodness. Read it. And that was also when I Something to Talk About also went through Pitch Wars, which was already a mentorship program. And so that was when I was considering like what mentors to submit to. And Helen was one of them. And I read it and I was like, I can't submit. She's so good.
Never read my work.
But she, I submitted to her and she liked it, so it was lovely. But no, I distinctly remember reading it and being like, I can't submit to her. She's too. Oh my god, she's so good. So yeah, The Kiss Quotient I feel like is, and then I'm not 100% sure I have read something other than romance since that book. And then I just fully dove in.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you read all like mostly contemporary? Or do you read historical too?
I'm contemporary all the time.
Yeah.
I like the Celestial Mechanics one.
Yes. So the gay one.
The gay one. I have read and loved that.
So you're saying I have range but no range at all.
Exactly. Yeah, I've read and loved that one. But yeah, I just love contemporary.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I also love contemporary. All right, another question. Yeah.
I have a fake question, and then I have a real one.
Okay.
The fake question is, could you reveal to us who your fan fiction was before it was the book?
I don't reveal it because you can figure it out if you want to very easily. But I don't reveal it because they killed a lesbian and so they don't deserve it.
Okay.
That alone should help.
We've stripped them of their rights.
Sorry, the question, which we did not repeat.
There we go. Let's hear it.
Was what fandom did the fan fiction start as? And
the answer is
no.
We dare not speak its name.
And then my real question was, can you reveal anything about what you're working on right now?
Yes. So this kind reader would like to know if you can reveal anything about what you're working on right now.
It's not finished. I am working on Cleat Cute, which is my next book is about two female soccer players who are sort of battling each other for a spot on the World Cup roster and realize that maybe like cooperation is going to be better than competition for them. And it's Grumpy Sunshine and Idiots to Lovers as always. It's a lot. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm annoyed at myself for not finishing it, but I'm having a lot of fun writing it. So it still works.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Do you have any like clit puns in the book?
Well, I'm going to now.
Great. All right. Any more questions?
Did Cameron in the back have a question?
My question was stolen.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll ask another question. How did you
and amazing.
Please disclose the source of your dazzling personality.
You know, I have always wanted to be like the cool, mysterious one who like people were intimidated by, but I'm like, a golden retriever puppy instead. So it just never worked out for me to be like. Also, I will tell anyone anything at all times, so like the mysteriousness does not work either.
I feel that. I definitely. I'm now just picturing you walking to this event like Mickey Mouse. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
I loved hearing about your spreadsheet of possible characters. They're really interesting, and I have to know, based on that, do you have a Halloween costume picked out yet?
Wow.
Oh, jeez. I actually, we are. The question was.
The question was, does Meryl have a Halloween costume?
I do have I have to go to, not have to, I get to go to a costume party that one of my friends is throwing. And so we did have to think of one, and I think that my wife and I are going as Steve Bonnet and Blackbeard from our friends.
Nice.
Mostly because I got the perm, and I feel like it works. It works for that. And yeah, so I think that's what we're gonna be. We have made absolutely no effort to get costumes, but that's the plan.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Yes.
Follow-up question. What would Cassie and Aaron's couple costume be?
Jeez Louise. I have actually written, this would not be, I'm not gonna answer the question correctly. The question was, I'm really bad at repeating them. The question was, what would Cassie and Aaron's couple costume be? And I'm not going to answer it, but I'm going to tell a different fun story. I have written, sometimes I like to, especially when I'm stuck in writing, I will write things that will not be in any book that I ever, that ever exists. So I, at one point wrote, I wrote Cassie and Aaron when Joe and Emma from Something to Talk About get their picture taken on the red carpet. And I wrote like Cassie bringing her laptop in, being like, I knew she was a lesbian. So I feel like, I mean, I don't know that really that there's necessarily an option to go with Joe and Emma, but I like to imagine that. You know?
I think we have one farther back. Yeah.
I was wondering, it seems like the amount of queer romances, both in YA and adult fiction, has really increased steadily over the past 5 or 6 years. But queer romances featuring women or like queer female leads has only really increased in like I would say like the last 2-3 or so years, and I'm wondering if you've seen any kind of shift on the sort of publishing side that's reflecting these changing attitudes, or like what does that really look like from the other end?
So the question was, I'm remembering to say this first this time, is that we've been seeing more queer romance in general, both YA and adult, but in the last 5 years or so, but specifically like queer romance involving women has been more in the last 2 or 3 years, and what has looked like from publishing. And I have to say I don't know the change because I've only been in publishing that long.
I guess I can speak to this a little bit as somebody who's written both and published both. I really think it comes down to a lot of people have a lot of internalized misogyny and lesbophobia, and it was harder years back. It was harder to sell women, like queer women, just straight up. Like it was hard to convince the powers that be to spend their money on it.
And I do think that some people think that's still the case, and like because that used to be the case, they have decided like queer women don't sell, and you're like,
yes, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Is I do think things are changing, and I mean I think that obviously they're not changing as fast as any of us would like, but I think we very much defeat ourselves when we continue to tell ourselves that queer women don't sell, because they are continuing to sell more and more. And so I think that the publishing trends and like also like what we tell ourselves are both kind of leveling up.
I mean, because in publishing, whether it's something queer or not, the things that publishing puts money toward are the things that sell.
Yes.
So if publishing has decided, queer women don't sell, and then they don't put money toward it, then it doesn't sell, as you said, self-fulfilling prophecy. So yeah, I do think we're moving in the right direction anyway.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely, and
I think.
I'll continue fighting the good
Yeah,
fight.
as long as Meryl keeps publishing more strap-on scenes, I think that the world will be a better place.
You know, I did actually want to write a strap-on scene in Cleat Cute, but I realized that the character who would have had one is too poor to have a good one, so I don't think that I'm going
Oh
to.
my god, can we have a mutual aid fund?
Maybe they buy one together.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe we'll go in that direction.
Yeah, it'd be a gift. I mean, who doesn't have that one friend who would totally give you a strap-on for Christmas?
We do literally have a friend who used to sell for pure romance or whatever,
Yeah.
and after a game night one time, everybody went home, some of us unknowingly, with dildos in their bags. And she put it in the diaper bag of one of our friends, and luckily they figured it out before, taking their kid to childcare, with a big orange dildo in the bag. But so yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe it happens.
Oh my god. Well, so there are ways. Where there is a will, there is a way. All right. Are we at time, or I think we got all our questions.
Oh, we have another
Oh,
question.
one more question. Yeah.
Can you talk about your experience just publishing and selling this book?
Yeah. The question was, can I talk about my experience publishing and selling this book? I came, as I said, I wrote this book prior to writing something to talk about. I queried it, which means sending it to agents, long before I had any idea what I was doing. And when it was not prepared, not ready to be queried. Shockingly, I did not get an agent through that. Switched to something to talk about. Obviously, that went well. And kind of never thought I was going to come back to this. In part because, as we talked about, something to talk about is an important book, talks about important things. And I was like, this is a ridiculous book. So
I love that it's ridiculous.
I have grown, I loved that it was ridiculous then too, but I didn't know that other people were going to love that it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So actually when we did sell it, I literally remember having a conversation with Vicky where I was like, I'm still you're buying this, this one? Just because it's ridiculous. And I love that. And I love that we're able to do that. But yeah, when I did actually come back to it, to the draft, I came back to it at a time when I was not doing well with writing. I had written an entire other book that didn't go well and had to also be shelved, and just I wasn't feeling good about myself. I had switched agents, I didn't have a publisher, and we were my plan was just to take a month away from that other book that I'd already written and was trying to revise, just take a month away from it to get some space. And I switched and went back to Mistakes Were Made, and I was like, oh, this is fun, and I'm enjoying writing, which I haven't done in months. And so that was really wonderful. I feel every time after every writing session, I then texted 4 people about this is how much I wrote today, and it was so much fun, because that had just not happened in a really long time. So I think that is part of why, you said you can tell I had fun writing this book. I was not only having fun, but shocked that I was having fun writing this book. And we sold it, which I was oh, okay, I get to also write things that are just silly and ridiculous and really, really fun. And yeah, then I revised it into the dual point of view, which when I first wrote it, I was closer in age to Cassie, and upon revising it, I was closer in age to Aaron, which has been sort of fun.
It's called method writing.
I shelved it intentionally for long enough. But yeah, so and then we sold it, and now it's here.
I love that. I love that for you, and I think queer triumph and queer, victory are important, and also queer silliness and queer horniness are very important too.
Yeah, honestly, I feel I've learned a ton about writing and publishing since first querying this book that I had no business querying. But honestly, what I feel I'm happiest to have learned is that, yeah, queer silliness is just as important, and that I can write completely ridiculous things and unhinged things, and readers are gonna have as much fun as I'm having writing it.
Hell yeah. All right, I think that's our time. Thank you all so much. I think our friend Julia is gonna come and let you know how the signing line is gonna work.
Wait, before we do this, I just want you all to know Casey has a ghost cowboy earring, or I'll say cowpoke, I don't know their gender.
Yeah. Let's not assume.
I'm sorry about that. And I'm obsessed with it, and I didn't know.
Yeah.
I figured people couldn't see it, and I've been
realized
staring
people
at it the
couldn't
whole
see it from
time.
stage, but yes, it is a ghost wearing cowboy hat and cowboy boots.
Just needed you all to know that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's really important. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Casey and Meryl, for such a wonderful conversation. Just a reminder, Meryl is going to be signing at that back desk. We'll give them a moment to get settled. And before you go up to the desk, my colleague Jenny is going to write your name on a sticky note to help take the pressure off. We do have some additional copies of Mistakes Were Made at the front where you checked in. We also have all of Casey's books. We also have Something to Talk About, which is just as wonderful, but in very different ways than Mistakes Were Made. If you're looking for a bathroom, we've got a door down there that says employees only, but for tonight, ignore the sign and head on in. That's all from me. Let's give these two a huge round of applause.